4-1. Above-ground activists. The peaceful above-ground activists are now, have been, and must always be the backbone of our cause. They are our public voice and our public image. They range in description from the quiet elderly lady who has supported peace and freedom for years in her own humble way, to the college professor who will likely never reach a level of real influence in the university system due to his dedication to truth and freedom. The podcaster faithfully sharing his voice with any who will listen, and the brave freedom fighter who uses every opportunity to film the police or other authoritarians as they beat down the innocent. The independent journalist who refuses to kowtow to authority, to the stalwart grandfather who uses wisdom and his own peaceful life as an example for his family. These and others are all examples of the activism that provides the model of the world that we can someday possess. These activists are our sales force in the marketplace of ideas, offering a better worldview and a better product than our enemy, the state. Ultimately, it's the market that will choose the timing of the death of the state. Currently, there's a thriving market demand for the state. Most people don't understand the alternatives, nor can they imagine a world without monopolized aggression. Also, people tend to be loyal to brand-specific products, and the state is the brand mother trusted, the brand Gramps fought for during the war, and it's the only brand they ever hear about on their television. Most people have very little exposure to the violent, bloody monster that is hidden under the surface of every encounter with government agents. Many people are either employed directly or indirectly by governments, or they have close friends or relatives who are. And the process of voting, along with the propaganda that goes with it, exists for the purpose of convincing the individual that when they vote, they create government. So when they think of government, they think of themselves or their uncle or their neighbor. When they hear about some cop beating a pregnant woman to death, or shooting an old man, or choking a child, they assume that person did something that deserved such actions. How could they think otherwise? How could they condemn government when they believe they are government? This is what I mean when I say there is a market demand for the state. This explains why, when someone finally feels the fangs of the beast in their own flesh, they are shocked and horrified, and they don't understand why their precious government is behaving like it is. They'll repeat over and over, "I have faith in the system, I'm innocent, and I'll have my day in court." They'll chant their mantra, trying to change reality through their faith. Or they'll insist that it's just this court, this bureaucrat, this agency, this city, this police chief that's the problem, and if we could just let someone in government know about this mix-up, then government would fix this problem. This explains why an otherwise rational mother would intentionally call the police to help with her out-of-control child. Most of the time, these sad people will maintain their faith in this myth right up to the point that the obedient government servant ends the life of their innocent child. This sad process is very much like what happens when a powerful predator grabs a small, weak animal, and the animal goes limp and seems to faint. It's our job to wake them up and encourage them to bite back. The state, for some 600 generations, has taught humans to act like a herd rather than individuals. We see the predator grab one of us, and rather than brave men and women instantly falling upon the predator, beating him senseless, we pull back and bleat or run away. We close our curtains. We change lanes. We blame the victim. But there are some that are slowly remembering who we are. There are those among us who are remembering that we are not a herd to be sheared or eaten. We are individuals capable of empathy for our fellow humans, and we are beginning to stand up to the predators. Currently, this process involves things like filming police thuggery and then exposing that thuggery on social media. Things like picking through news stories from the mainstream media and exposing the lies. Like pointing out to coworkers the travesty of taxation and the inefficiencies of central planning. Like speaking out against wars and the criminals who run the military-industrial complex. Simply teaching others about the invisible tax called inflation and how fractional reserve central banking is a scam. Parents raising unregistered, unschooled children who understand the trivium and can explain Diocletian's problem reaction solution. Also, parents working with other parents in support of their efforts. These people are springing up around the world. They are the above-ground network of activists, and they are no longer allowing themselves to be herded. Instead, they are making themselves heard. The above-ground activists predict the failures of the state, advertise the lies and failings of the state, and guide those who wish to learn about a greater understanding of peace, liberty, and a free life. But wait, doesn't that mean that they're evangelists? Not at all. You see, there is a vast gulf between evangelism and advertising or sales. Sure, many of the tactics are similar and they share certain characteristics, but the similarity is superficial. First, there is always a level of fanaticism involved in evangelism. High emotions mixed with dynamic personalities, topped off with just a shot of over-the-top showmanship, and you have an evangelist. Your typical evangelist can sing a good song, tap out a spiffy dance, but rarely is found in consistent principles, logic, and reason. They almost always know the basic talking points, but have almost never delved deeper than the surface on any doctrine. They seek the big emotional conversation, shouting from the stage with the flash of fame and the passing of the collection plate. They swoop their congregation off its feet and impart a miracle of the emotions that will hopefully last until the next performance and the next passing of the collection plate. These people should be avoided, no matter how they make you feel. The second problem in regards to the evangelist is his tendency to be a proselytizer. He tends to not be satisfied by simply helping those who are looking for directions, but he seems to want to rush out onto the highways of life and stop traffic so he can tell everyone the way to get to the location he thinks they should be heading towards. Typically, the evangelist's flamboyance and showmanship are only overshadowed by his incredible assumption of self-importance. He doesn't just want to sell his goods, he wants everyone to want him. His primary product is himself, and his message is secondary at best, although usually the message comes in a distant third in importance after his stage performance. Again, we don't need these people. They are cheerleaders having little understanding of and no effect on the actual game. One may ask, if we don't emphasize evangelical recruiting, how will our numbers ever grow to the point that we can have a real impact? This question typically assumes two fallacies. The first and worst being the fallacy that we need a majority or we need vast numbers to win. We don't. Democracy be damned. We will never have a majority, we shouldn't care about a majority, and we don't need a majority. Market thinking isn't about majorities. Let the collectivists worry about majorities. We only need a better product, and we already have that. The second fallacy is the assumption that it's our job to recruit anarchists. It is not our job to recruit anarchists. Humans are born anarchists. It's our true nature. Tricks fool people into believing in the state, and as long as those people are comfortable in their pods, clicking the feed bar, you will never be able to truly convert them to freedom. And again, we don't need to. The failings of the state do a far better job of waking up the anarchist spirit in people than any 2-bit, soapbox, YouTube preacher ever has or ever could. Selling a product to those who are looking for that very product is vastly easier and more rewarding than evangelism. We're talking about the difference between religious fanaticism and market demand. The word evangelist comes from the word angel and literally means divinely sent messenger. Again, we don't need them. Speaking of divinely sent messengers, the hard truth is that we don't need any beloved elderly leader and former politician from Texas selling us more politics as a path to freedom any more than we need a great philosopher from Canada to enlighten us and indoctrinate us into his internet hate-your-mother cult. Politicians and cult leaders of any kind are worse than the cheerleading evangelists. If your version of liberty depends upon a weekly message from any great man, you are doing it wrong, and this book is not aimed at you. The state is the great recruiter of anarchists. Having an intellectually stimulating conversation with your fellow polo players at the country club on a Sunday afternoon, or the internet version of that scenario played out on social media, may create a theoretical anarchist. My experience has consistently shown that these theoretical anarchists get a big thrill out of changing their online profile to include an anarchist flag and adding some phrase to their header that includes the word voluntarism or agorism. But the moment there's a boots-on-the-ground test of these theoretical anarchists, they'll start to puke status blather like beer spewing from a freshman on frat pledge night. The reason for this phenomenon is complex and unnecessary to evaluate here. For the purpose of this manual, all we need to keep in mind is that the state does the job that rhetorical hoop jumping simply can't accomplish. Telling a person about the boot of the state may stimulate them intellectually, but when Officer Friendly actually drags their child out of a car and beats him half to death, the charge of heart is real and permanent. Our job is to guide that change of heart and encourage others to be empathetic. The state is its own worst enemy. It will kill itself. The question is, will we let it live long enough to take all of us out with it when it goes? Right now, you should be asking, short of having everyone's child sacrificed to the state to prove we're right about the state, what can we do? (4.1.1) The 7-part job. The above-ground network's 7-part job in order of priority. 1. Provide for yourself and your family. Dependence is the opposite of independence. The optimum situation is to secure an income stream that doesn't depend on the state. However, if providing for your family means a government job that doesn't require you to directly aggress upon the innocent, then you have to do what you have to do to survive. Not everyone has the luxury of an optimum situation, so first provide as best as you can. Strive for consistent, principled behavior in your own life. To steal a phrase, rather than focusing on the splinter in your neighbor's eye, you should make sure there's not a log in your own. If you believe what you say, you will live it. If you aren't living what you say, you don't believe it. Living a principled life is a reward of its own. You don't have to wait for some coming glory or some pie in the sky. When you look in the mirror and you know the person looking back is genuine, and when you close your eyes at night knowing you have been true to yourself, you will live a happier life. 3. Prepare for the systematic failure of the state. Beans, Band-Aids, Bitcoin, bullion, and bullets. Survivalists and preppers have endured concentrated defamation by believers in the state. This fact alone means we should take note of their activities because they're doing something that scares statists. That's not to say we should believe every foil hat-wearing wackadoodle with a survival website or podcast. We shouldn't. Some of them are seriously disjointed, and some of them are pure con men running scams on the gullible. But being connected to the prepper community and being prepared for a variety of natural or man-made disasters is never a bad idea. Having a disaster plan and having a get-out-of-dodge plan should be standard operating procedure. Also, having a skill set that includes some survival and do-it-yourself abilities is never a bad thing. For example, every parent should know some basic first aid. 4. Help those whom you can help and let go of those whom you cannot help. Emergency workers are trained in triage so that they may assign the priority of treatment based on the degree of injuries or illness of a large number of patients. For me, the most difficult part of triage is when you recognize the patient's condition is such that you cannot save them, and helping them will prevent you from helping someone else. You don't want to walk away, but you can't stay. Some simply cannot be saved. That's not to say you must shun family or friends. It doesn't mean you should defoo anyone. It means you must come to grips with the fact that some of them will never leave the mental comfort of slavery. They will cling to their chains to their last breath. Accept it and move on with your life. It's not your job to force slaves into freedom. 5. Expose the evil and lies of the state as you speak truth in the face of power. One of the hardest things a person can do is to stand on the truth when the world around you is swimming in lies. One of the bravest things a person can do is to speak truth in the face of power. Some state this phrase as speak truth to power, but as others have shown, That statement is flawed as it indicates that we should seek to change the minds of those in political power by influencing them with our words. We should not. Attempting to influence those who hold political power to do our will morally places us in the same category as every other person who uses the political means to achieve their goals. Speaking truth in the face of power indicates that we are speaking in spite of the threat we face. We are not speaking to power, we are speaking truth to posterity, and the powers be damned. 6. Publicly disassociate yourself from the underground, denouncing all acts of aggression. This requires a delicate balance. There are times when we can carefully take a lesson from our enemy. A myriad of politicians over the last few thousand years have turned double talk into an art form. By that I mean answering a direct, pointed question by talking around the topic while boldly announcing some ethical point that is very similar to the question but doesn't directly address the question. In doing this, one can avoid telling a lie while avoiding the question. For example, if the topic of violent anarchists causes someone to accuse you of supporting violence, you can explain the zero aggression principle, or non-aggression principle if you prefer that terminology. And you can further explain that some people who call themselves anarchists are actually communists and socialists, and they do tend toward violence and destruction since they don't respect property ownership. However, peaceful anarchists embrace the zero aggression principle, or NAP, so we reject all initiation of aggression and we respect the property of peaceful people. When you take that path, deception may be employed, and some say there is no difference between deception and a lie, but that is a matter for the individual to decide for their situation. However, if you actually discipline yourself to avoid acts of aggression and commit yourself to peaceful means, this task of disassociation becomes much easier. But no matter the method, there must be a public disassociation between peaceful activism and the underground. 7. Safely engage in direct activism. Things like filming police, podcasting, or other activities, or quietly providing support for the underground according to your abilities and resources. That support doesn't necessarily require money or direct contact. There are many things the individual may do to support the underground without directly interacting with those activists. Again, your imagination is a required tool in this endeavor. Or, if you have carefully examined yourself and you are one of the few uniquely suited for direct involvement in the underground movement, then pursue that path with care and wisdom.